My father died 3 weeks ago, and I just found out I'm inheriting everything, and now my half-siblings are calling me a selfish monster for not sharing. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Who's the Villain? AITA. Also, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing where you all are. Now, let me explain this absolute mess. I'm 20 AF, and my dad passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack at 61. We were incredibly close. My mom died when I was 9, and it was just the two of us for years. He never remarried, though he dated here and there. Dad was a successful architect, owned his own firm, had a beautiful house in the suburbs, and a decent investment portfolio. Nothing crazy rich, but comfortable, probably around $2.3 million in total assets. Here's where it gets complicated. About 6 months before he died, Dad sat me down and told me something I never knew. He had 2 other kids from a relationship before he met my mom. Half-siblings, a brother Marcus, 32M, and a sister Diane, 30F. He said he was young and stupid, got his college girlfriend pregnant twice, then basically abandoned them when he was 24 because he wasn't ready to be a father. He paid some child support for a few years, but eventually cut contact completely when their mom moved across the country. I was shocked. Like, how do you just not mention you have 2 other kids for 28 years? But Dad seemed genuinely remorseful. He said he'd been trying to reconnect with them recently, that he'd reached out through Facebook and they'd been talking. He seemed hopeful they could build some kind of relationship. I was supportive, I guess, but also kind of weirded out. These were strangers to me. I met Marcus and Diane exactly once, about 4 months before Dad died. Dad invited them over for dinner at his place. It was awkward as hell. Marcus was standoffish, barely made eye contact, answered questions with one-word responses. Diane was overly friendly in this fake way that made my skin crawl, asking lots of questions about Dad's house, his business, what his retirement plans were. At one point, she literally said, "Wow, Dad, you really did well for yourself after you left us to struggle with Mom." The tension was insane. Dad tried to smooth things over, apologized repeatedly for not being there. Marcus just shrugged and said, "Yeah, well, you weren't there. That's just facts." Diane kept making these little comments about how hard their childhood was, how their mom worked 3 jobs, how they both had to take out massive student loans while Dad was living the good life. I felt bad for them, I did, but I also felt defensive of my dad and the life we built together after my mom died. After that dinner, Dad seemed discouraged. He told me, "I know I messed up with them, sweetheart. I just hope I can make it right somehow." I asked if he was planning to give them money or something, and he said, "I don't know yet. I need to think about it." That was the last time we really talked about it. Then he died. Sudden, no warning, just collapsed at his office. I was devastated. I planned the funeral, notified family and friends. I did send a message to Marcus and Diane through Facebook telling them what happened and when the service was. They both showed up, which I appreciated. They seemed genuinely sad, which surprised me a little. Diane cried during the eulogy I gave. Marcus came up to me afterward and said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I wish we'd had more time with him." It felt sincere. A week after the funeral, I met with Dad's lawyer to go over the will. This is where everything went to absolute shit. Dad's will was straightforward. Everything goes to me. The house, the business, the investments, his personal belongings, all of it to his daughter, meaning me. There was no mention of Marcus or Diane at all. I wasn't entirely surprised, honestly. Dad wrote that will 7 years ago, long before he reconnected with them. And he never mentioned updating it in the 6 months he'd been back in contact with them. But I figured Marcus and Diane would assume they were getting something. I mean, he was their father too. even if he was a deadbeat. I debated what to do. Part of me thought, this is what Dad wanted. He had time to change the will if he wanted them to have something, and he didn't. But another part of me felt guilty. These people grew up without a father because of his choices. Shouldn't they get something? I talked to my boyfriend, Jake, 29 Memi, about it. He was firmly in the keep everything camp. He said, your dad made his choice. He raised you, not them. You don't owe them anything. Besides, you're going to need that money for your future, for our future. Jake and I have been together for 3 years, and we've talked about getting engaged soon, maybe buying a house together. That money would obviously help with that. But I also talked to my aunt, Dad's sister, and she had a different take. She said, your father felt terrible about abandoning those kids. If he'd lived longer, I think he would have made it right. Maybe you should do that for him. That made me feel worse. I decided to sit on the decision for a bit. I wasn't going to make any hasty moves. But then, 2 weeks after the funeral, Diane called me. She was friendly at first, asking how I was holding up if I needed help with anything. Then she said, so, I assume we'll be meeting with the lawyer soon to discuss Dad's estate. Marcus and I would like to be involved in those conversations. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. Diane, Dad's will leaves everything to me. There's nothing in it about you or Marcus. The line went dead silent for a long moment. Then Diane said very slowly, what did you just say? I repeated it. The will leaves everything to me. I'm the sole beneficiary. She exploded. Are you fucking kidding me? He owed us. He abandoned us. And you're telling me he didn't leave us anything? Not even a goddamn apology in the form of money? I tried to explain that the will was written years ago, before they reconnected, but she wasn't hearing it. She said, you know what the right thing to do is, don't you? You need to split that inheritance with us. We're his children too. I said, Diane, I understand you're upset, but this is what Dad wanted. Legally, it's all mine. Legally doesn't mean morally, she shot back. If you keep everything, you're just as selfish as he was. Actually, you're worse, because you have a choice and he didn't. That stung. I told her I needed time to think, and she said, think fast, because Marcus and I are talking to a lawyer about contesting the will. Then she hung up. I immediately called Dad's lawyer. He said they could try to contest, but they'd have a very weak case. Dad was of sound mind when he wrote the will, and there's no legal requirement to leave anything to children he didn't raise. Unless they can prove undue influence or that he was incompetent, which they can't, they won't win, he told me. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. 2 days later, Marcus texted me. His message was shorter but just as pointed. Diane told me about the will. I can't believe you're okay with this. We deserved better from him, and now we deserve better from you. Do the right thing. I didn't respond right away. I was torn. Jake kept saying, don't give them a dime. They're guilt-tripping you. My aunt kept saying, give them something. It's what your father would have wanted. I felt paralyzed. Then things escalated. Diane started posting on Facebook. Vague at first, stuff like, sometimes the people who inherit everything inherit nothing of value. And blood doesn't mean family, I guess. But then she got more specific. She posted a long status about how her father abandoned her and her brother, reconnected briefly before his death, and then left them nothing in his will while his golden child daughter kept everything. She didn't name me directly, but everyone who knew our situation would know exactly who she was talking about. The post got dozens of comments, mostly from her friends, all saying things like, that's so messed up, and you should definitely contest that, and his other daughter sounds heartless. I was furious. I sent her a message. "Can you please take that post down? This is a private family matter." She responded immediately. "It stopped being private when you decided to screw us over. Maybe some public pressure will help you see reason." I blocked her after that, but the damage was done. Some of Dad's old friends saw the post or heard about it and started reaching out to me with concerns. One of Dad's former business partners called and said, "I heard about the will situation. I know it's not my place, but your dad did talk to me about feeling guilty about those kids. Maybe you should consider sharing." Even my own cousin texted me saying, "Dude, just give them something so this drama ends." I felt like I was being attacked from all sides. Jake was the only one fully supporting me, and even he was getting frustrated. "Why are you even considering this?" he asked. "They're trying to manipulate you into giving up what's rightfully yours." But it didn't feel rightfully mine, not entirely. I kept thinking about what Diane said, that legally doesn't mean morally. Was I being selfish? Dad did abandon them. Their childhoods were harder because he wasn't there. But he was there for me. I was his daughter too, the one he actually raised. I decided to make one final attempt at a civil conversation. I unblocked Diane and sent her a message proposing we meet in person to talk things through. She agreed surprisingly. We met at a coffee shop last week, and I brought my aunt for support. Diane brought Marcus. They were both colder than I expected. I started by saying I understood their frustration and that I was considering options, but I needed them to understand my perspective too. Diane cut me off. "Your perspective is that you grew up with a dad and we didn't. Your perspective is that you got everything and we got nothing. What else is there to understand?" I tried to explain that I loved my dad, that losing him was devastating, and that the inheritance wasn't just about money. It was the last thing he left me. Marcus scoffed. "It's easy to be sentimental about money when you have it." My aunt jumped in, trying to mediate. She suggested I could give them each a portion, maybe 15% each, leaving me with 70%. Diane laughed bitterly. "So we get scraps while she gets the feast? No. We want an equal three-way split, a third each." I was stunned. "A third? That's over $750,000 each. You barely knew him." "Because he didn't give us the chance," Marcus shouted, loud enough that people in the coffee shop turned to look. "You think we didn't want a father? You think we didn't deserve one? He owed us, and now you owe us." I said, "I don't owe you anything. I'm sorry for what Dad did, but I didn't do it." Diane leaned forward, her voice icy. "If you don't split this equally, we're going to make your life hell. We'll contest the will, we'll drag this out for years, we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." That was it. I stood up and said, "Then do what you have to do. I'm done with this conversation." My aunt tried to call me back, but I left. Now they've hired a lawyer, like they threatened. I got a letter yesterday saying they're officially contesting the will on the grounds that Dad intended to change it before he died and didn't have the chance. It's bullshit. There's no evidence of that. But my lawyer says it'll still cost me time and money to fight it. Meanwhile, Diane's Facebook campaign has ramped up. She's posting almost daily about greedy family members and injustice. Some people are even commenting on my own profile, strangers telling me I'm a terrible person. Jake wants me to deactivate my social media entirely, but I refuse to hide. My aunt is disappointed in me. She said, "You're choosing money over family." But that's not fair, is it? They're not really my family. I barely know them. And Dad chose to leave everything to me. Doesn't that count for something? So now I'm stuck. Fighting a legal battle I'll probably win, but that will drain me emotionally and financially. being called selfish and heartless by people who don't know the full story, questioning whether I'm actually a bad person for wanting to keep what my father left me. The legal battle started getting real about a week after that disastrous coffee shop meeting. I received official paperwork from Marcus and Diane's attorney, a 47-page document alleging that Dad had expressed clear intent to revise his will to include them, that he was under emotional duress in his final months, and that I had somehow exercised undue influence over him. Reading it made me physically sick. The undue influence claim was the most insulting part. Their lawyer argued that because I was Dad's only child for most of his life, I had manipulated him into maintaining the original will even after Marcus and Diane came back into the picture. They claimed I isolated Dad from them and poisoned him against reconciling properly. None of it was true. I saw my dad maybe twice a week for dinner. We talked on the phone regularly, sure, but I never once told him not to change his will. I never even knew if he was considering it. My lawyer, Richard, told me not to worry. These claims are baseless, he said. They have no evidence of intent to modify, no proof of duress, and certainly no proof of undue influence. This is a Hail Mary attempt to get a settlement out of you. That last part stuck with me. They're hoping you'll offer them money just to make this go away, Richard explained. It's cheaper to settle than to fight, and they know that. But I refuse to give them anything out of fear. If I was going to share the inheritance, it would be because I decided it was right, not because they bullied me into it. Then my life started falling apart in other ways. Diane's Facebook posts got worse. She started sharing screenshots of messages I'd supposedly sent her, except they were taken completely out of context or edited to make me look terrible. One post showed a message where I'd written, "I don't think Dad would want this drama," but she cropped out the part where she'd threatened to ruin my reputation. Her caption was, "Imagine being so cold you use your dead father to justify greed." Her friends ate it up. Comments poured in calling me a narcissist, a spoiled brat, a heartless bitch. Someone even commented, "I hope karma gets you." Diane liked that comment. I showed Jake, and he was furious. "You need to sue her for defamation," he said. But Richard advised against it. "It'll just make you look worse," he warned. "She'll play the victim even harder, and you'll be the rich girl trying to silence the poor abandoned children. Let it go." So I did, but it killed me to watch strangers judge me based on lies. Then people I actually knew started getting involved. Dad's old business partner, Greg, called me again. This time he wasn't gentle. "I heard Marcus and Diane are contesting the will," he said. "Your father would be ashamed of how you're handling this. Those kids deserved better from him, and they deserve better from you." I tried to explain my side, but Greg cut me off. "I don't want to hear it. Your dad talked to me about them, about how guilty he felt. He would have wanted you to share." Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been slapped. Greg was at my dad's funeral. He gave a eulogy about what a good man Dad was. Now he thought I was the villain? My cousin Stephanie texted me too. "Hey, so I saw Diane's posts. Is all that true? Did Dad really not leave them anything?" I explained the situation, and Stephanie replied, I get that it's legally yours, but don't you think it's kind of messed up? They're his kids too." I didn't respond. What was the point? Everyone had already made up their minds. Even worse, my aunt, Dad's sister, who'd been at that coffee shop meeting, started pulling away from me. She called me a few days after the legal papers arrived and said, "I think you're making a mistake. Your father loved you, but he felt horrible about Marcus and Diane. I really believe he would have changed that will if he'd had more time. I asked her how she could possibly know that, and she said, because he told me. About 2 months before he died, he said he was thinking about it. That hit me like a truck. He said that? Why didn't you tell me before? Because I thought you'd do the right thing on your own, she replied. But now you're fighting them in court, and it's ugly. I can't support this, sweetheart. I'm sorry. She hasn't called me since. It's been almost 3 weeks. I tried texting her twice, but she left me on read. Losing her support hurt more than I expected. She was my last link to Dad's side of the family, and now she's basically disowned me over this. Jake has been my rock through all of it, but even he's getting frustrated. Why do you keep second-guessing yourself? He asked last night. Your dad left you everything. End of story. These people are trying to guilt-trip you, and it's working. I told him I wasn't second-guessing, but that was a lie. I was. Constantly. Because here's the thing. What if my aunt is right? What if Dad really was planning to change the will? He had 6 months after reconnecting with Marcus and Diane. 6 months. And he didn't do it. Does that mean he decided against it? Or does it mean he just didn't get around to it before he died? I'll never know, and that uncertainty is eating me alive. Meanwhile, the legal costs are piling up. Richard bills $400 an hour, and we've already racked up over $8,000 in fees just responding to the initial contest filing. He says it could go to $30,000 or more if this drags out, maybe even $50,000 if it goes to trial. That money comes out of the estate, which means it's technically my money. Every dollar spent fighting Marcus and Diane is a dollar I'm losing. They know that. Their lawyer probably told them that. But it gets worse. About 2 weeks ago, Marcus showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was home alone. Jake was at work, and I heard a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus standing there. My heart started racing. I almost didn't answer, but then I thought maybe he wanted to talk, to de-escalate things. So I opened the door. Marcus, what are you doing here? I asked, not opening the screen door between us. I wanted to talk to you without lawyers and without Diane, he said. He looked tired, older than his 32 years. Can I come in? I hesitated, but then let him in. We sat in my living room, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Marcus spoke. I don't want to do this, he said quietly. The legal stuff, I mean. It's exhausting, and it's expensive for us too. But Diane's convinced we have to fight for what's ours, and honestly, I think she's right. What's yours? I repeated. Dad left the money to me. How is it yours? Marcus looked me straight in the eye. Because he owed us. You got 28 years with a father. We got nothing. 0. Do you know what that's like? Growing up knowing your dad chose not to be in your life? That he picked you over us? He didn't pick me over you, I said, my voice shaking. He left your mom before I was even born. That's not my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, Marcus replied. But you benefited from it. You got the good life, the stable home, the college fund, everything. And now you get all his money too? How is that fair? I didn't have an answer. He was right that it wasn't fair. But life isn't fair, is it? I didn't choose to be born to my dad and mom. I didn't choose for him to abandon Marcus and Diane. None of that was in my control. Marcus kept talking. Diane wants 1/3 each. I'd be fine with less. 20% each for me and Diane. You keep 60. That's still the lion's share. You'd still get over $1 million. Isn't that enough? I asked him why I should give them anything at all, and he said something I wasn't expecting. Because you're a better person than our father was. At least, I hope you are. That stuck with me. After Marcus left, I cried for an hour. I called Jake, and he immediately came home from work. He was pissed that Marcus had shown up. "That's harassment," Jake said. "You should tell your lawyer." But I didn't want to escalate things further. I just wanted it to be over. I thought about Marcus's offer, 20% each. That would be about $460,000 per person, leaving me with roughly $1.4 million. It was still a fortune. More than enough to buy a house, start a family, live comfortably. But was it right? And more importantly, would giving them that money actually end this nightmare, or would it just validate their bullying? I talked to Richard about it. He said, "If you want to settle, we can propose that. But I'll warn you, once you start negotiating, they'll smell blood in the water. Diane's already pushing for a third. If you offer 20%, she'll counter with 25, then 30. There's no winning with people like this." He was probably right, but I was so tired. The stress was affecting my sleep, my work, my relationship with Jake. I'd lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was this stupid inheritance and whether I was a terrible person for wanting to keep it. Then, about a week ago, something happened that changed everything. I got a message on Facebook from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Linda, and she said she was Dad's ex-girlfriend from about 15 years ago. They dated for 2 years, she said, and she had some information about Marcus and Diane that I needed to know. I was suspicious, but curiosity got the better of me. I called her. Linda told me that during the time she'd dated my dad, he'd tried to reconnect with Marcus and Diane once before. This was back when they were teenagers. He'd reached out to their mom, offered to pay for college, wanted to be involved in their lives. According to Linda, their mom was open to it, but Marcus and Diane refused. They wanted nothing to do with him. They told him to fuck off and that it was too late. "Your dad was devastated," Linda said. "He talked about it all the time, how his kids hated him and he couldn't fix it. Eventually, he gave up trying. That's part of why we broke up, actually. He was too depressed." I asked Linda if she had any proof of this, and she said she didn't have documentation, but she remembered it clearly. She offered to write a statement for my lawyer if needed. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. If Linda was telling the truth, it meant Marcus and Diane had already rejected Dad once. They'd had a chance to have a relationship with him 15 years ago, and they said no. Now they were acting like victims who never got a chance. Was Linda lying? Or were Marcus and Diane rewriting history to suit their narrative? I told Richard about Linda, and he was intrigued. "If we can corroborate her story, it could help our case," he said. "It shows that your father tried to include them and they rejected him. That undermines their claim that he intended to change the will." But I wasn't sure I wanted to use Linda's information. It felt dirty, like I was weaponizing Dad's past against Marcus and Diane. And what if Linda was wrong or misremembering? I'd be dragging Dad's name through the mud based on hearsay. Jake, predictably, thought I should use it. "They're not playing fair," he said. "Why should you?" But that logic didn't sit right with me. Just because they were willing to lie and manipulate didn't mean I had to. Then, last week, Diane posted something that made my blood boil. It was a photo of her and Marcus as kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old, looking sad and disheveled. The caption read, "This is what we looked like while our father was living his best life with his real family. We were the dirty little secret he didn't want anyone to know about, and now his daughter is doing the same thing, pretending we don't exist. History repeats itself." The post went viral, not just among her friends, but actually viral. It got shared hundreds of times, picked up by some local news blog that does human interest stories. The blog article was titled, "Abandoned Children Fight for Inheritance After Father's Death," and it painted me as a greedy villain hoarding wealth while Dad's forgotten children struggled. The article didn't name me, but people who knew the situation figured it out. I started getting nasty messages from strangers. Someone created a fake Instagram account called GreedyDaughter28 and tagged me in posts calling me a selfish monster. Jake reported the account, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. I finally deactivated my Facebook. I couldn't take it anymore. But that just made Diane post, "Looks like the guilty party is running and hiding. Must be nice to have the luxury of avoiding consequences." My boss at work pulled me aside last week. She'd seen some of the posts. Apparently one of my coworkers is friends with someone who knows Diane. My boss said, "I don't want to pry into your personal life, but this situation is becoming a distraction. People in the office are talking. I need you to get it under control." I was humiliated. My job was now at risk because of this mess. I assured my boss it would be resolved soon, but I had no idea if that was true. Then, 3 days ago, Diane and Marcus's lawyer filed an amended complaint. This time, they added a new allegation that I had stolen personal items from Dad's house that were meant for them. Specifically, they claimed Dad had set aside some of his belongings, photo albums, his watch, some books, and told them these items were theirs. They said I took everything and refused to give them their rightful property. This was complete bullshit. After Dad died, I went through his house and packed up his belongings. I kept some things that were meaningful to me. His watch, yes, because he wore it every day and I wanted to have it. Some photo albums, most of which were pictures of me and Mom and Dad, not Marcus and Diane. I didn't steal anything. But now they were making it sound like I ransacked the place and hoarded everything out of spite. Richard said this amendment was a desperate move. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks," he explained. "It's not going to work, but it does make you look bad in the court of public opinion." And he was right. When Diane posted about the stolen items, people lost their minds. Comments like, "She even took their memories of him," and "What kind of monster steals from grieving siblings?" flooded in. I wanted to scream. They barely knew Dad. Those photo albums were my childhood, not theirs. But here's the thing. There were a few photos of Marcus and Diane in one of the albums. Baby pictures mostly, from before Dad left their mom. Maybe 5 or 6 photos total. Did they deserve to have those? Probably. But they never asked for them. They just accused me of stealing and filed legal paperwork. I told Richard I'd be willing to give them those specific photos if it would help settle things. He said, "Don't give them anything unless it's part of a formal settlement agreement. If you hand over those photos now, they'll say it's proof you took things you shouldn't have." So now I'm stuck holding on to photos that I don't even care about, being accused of theft, and watching my reputation get destroyed online. Meanwhile, Marcus and Diane are playing the role of victims perfectly, and everyone believes them. My aunt sent me one text last week. Just one. It said, "I saw what Diane posted about the photo albums. Please tell me it's not true." I didn't respond. What could I say that wouldn't sound defensive or guilty? Jake thinks I should countersue for defamation at this point. "They're destroying your life," he said. "You have to fight back." But Richard advised against it again. "You'll look like a bully," he said. "They're David, you're Goliath. You can't win in the court of public opinion." I feel trapped. Every move I make is wrong. If I fight, I'm a bully. If I settle, I'm validating their lies. If I give them nothing, I'm heartless. If I give them something, I'm admitting guilt. And through all of this, I keep thinking about my dad. What would he want me to do? My aunt says he'd want me to share. Marcus says he'd want to make things right. Jake says he'd want me to protect what's mine. But I honestly don't know. I wish he were here to tell me himself. Last night, I had a breakdown. I told Jake I was thinking about just giving them each 20% and being done with it. He looked at me like I was crazy. After everything they've put you through, he said. After the lies, the harassment, the legal threats, you're going to reward that behavior. I didn't have an answer. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm letting them win. But I'm so exhausted, and I just want my life back. Is that weak? Am I being a coward? I don't know anymore. All I know is that this inheritance, the thing that was supposed to be my dad's final gift to me, has become a curse. I wish he'd never died. I wish I'd never met Marcus and Diane. I wish none of this had ever happened. Everything came to a head 2 days ago. I'm writing this now because I honestly don't know if I made the right decision, but it's done, and I can't take it back. The breaking point came when I got a call from Dad's former secretary, Margaret. She's 67, worked with Dad for almost 20 years before retiring 3 years ago. She called me out of the blue and said, "Honey, I heard about what's happening with the will, and I need to tell you something." Margaret told me that about 8 weeks before Dad died, he'd called her. He was upset, talking about Marcus and Diane, saying he didn't know what to do. According to Margaret, Dad said, "I want to make things right with them, but every time I try, they just see dollar signs. I don't think they actually want a relationship with me. I think they just want my money." Margaret said she told him to trust his instincts, and Dad replied, "I worked my whole life to build something for my daughter. She's the one who was there when her mother died. She's the one who never abandoned me. Maybe the will should stay as it is." I asked Margaret if she was absolutely sure he said that, and she swore on her late husband's grave that those were his exact words. She offered to testify if needed. I thanked her, hung up, and immediately called Richard. Richard was thrilled. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "Combined with Linda's statement about them rejecting him years ago, we have a strong case that your father deliberately chose not to change the will. This isn't about him running out of time. He made a conscious decision." But here's what Richard didn't understand. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sick, because what Margaret told me confirmed something I'd been afraid of, that Marcus and Diane really were just after the money. And if that was true, why was I feeling guilty about keeping it? That night, Jake and I had a massive fight. I told him I was thinking about offering them 15% each just to end this nightmare and move on with my life. Jake lost it. He said, "Are you insane? You have proof now that your dad wanted you to have everything. Why would you give them a dime?" I tried to explain that it wasn't about what was legal or even what Dad wanted. It was about living with myself. "I can't spend this money knowing they grew up without a father because of him," I said. "That's not their fault." Jake said something that cut deep. "You know what your problem is. You care more about what strangers on the internet think than about your own future. You're willing to throw away hundreds of thousands of dollars because you can't handle people calling you selfish. That's weak." I told him that was unfair, and he said, "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've been second-guessing yourself since day one. Your dad left you that money. He chose you. When are you going to accept that?" We didn't speak the rest of the night. I slept on the couch. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Richard and told him I wanted to make a final settlement offer, $300,000 total, $150,000 each for Marcus and Diane. Not 15% of the estate, just a flat amount. Take it or leave it. And in exchange, they drop all legal claims, sign an NDA about the settlement amount, and agree to stop posting about me on social media. Richard thought it was too generous given the evidence we now had, but he agreed to present the offer. He sent it to their lawyer that afternoon. They responded within 3 hours. Diane's lawyer sent a formal rejection, saying the offer was insulting and that they would see me in court. But then, about an hour later, I got a text from Marcus. Just Marcus, not Diane. "Can we meet? Just you and me. No lawyers." I was hesitant, but something in his message felt different. Less angry, more resigned. I agreed to meet him at the same coffee shop where we'd had that disastrous meeting weeks ago. Marcus showed up looking exhausted. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke. "I want to take your offer," he said quietly. "The $150,000. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need, but Diane won't. She thinks we can win in court or at least force you into a bigger settlement." I asked why he was breaking ranks with his sister, and Marcus sighed. "Because I'm tired. This whole thing has consumed my life for weeks. I can't sleep. I can't focus at work. My girlfriend is ready to leave me because all I do is obsess about this inheritance." He paused. "And because I think you're right. Legally, it's your money. Dad left it to you. I don't like it, but that's the reality." I felt a wave of relief mixed with sadness. "What about Diane?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "Diane's convinced she's fighting some moral crusade. She sees you as the enemy, the symbol of everything Dad gave you and didn't give us. I don't think she'll ever let this go." He looked at me directly. "But I'm not Diane. I'm willing to accept that Dad made his choice, even if it hurts." We talked for another hour. Marcus told me about his childhood, about how hard it was growing up knowing his father didn't want him. He told me about the shame he felt telling people his dad wasn't around, about the anger he carried for years. But he also admitted that when Dad reached out 6 months ago, part of him was excited about the money, not just the relationship. "I'm not going to pretend I'm a saint," Marcus said. "Yeah, I wanted to know my dad, but I also thought maybe I'd finally get something from him after all these years. Is that terrible? Maybe, but it's honest." I appreciated the honesty more than he knew. We agreed that Richard would draw up a settlement agreement for Marcus only, $150,000 in exchange for dropping all claims and signing an NDA. Marcus would tell Diane he was out, but she could continue pursuing her case if she wanted. We shook hands before leaving. Marcus said, "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person. You're just in an impossible situation." I almost cried. Yesterday, Marcus signed the settlement agreement. I transferred $150,000 to his account this morning. It's done. He's out of the lawsuit. Diane, predictably, lost her mind. She posted on Facebook calling Marcus a traitor and a sellout. She said he took pennies while I fight for what we deserve. Her friends rallied around her in the comments, calling Marcus weak and praising Diane for standing her ground. Marcus texted me last night. "She'll come around eventually, or she won't. Either way, I'm at peace with this." I hope he really is. As for Diane's continued legal challenge, Richard says it's even weaker now. She's a single plaintiff claiming undue influence and intent to modify, but we have witness testimony contradicting that, and her own brother settled. The judge is going to see this as a shakedown. He predicts her lawyer will eventually advise her to drop it, but who knows? Diane seems willing to burn every bridge to prove a point. The public perception battle continues. Diane's still posting, still painting me as the villain. But honestly, I've stopped caring as much. I deactivated all my social media. The people who matter, the ones who actually know me, support me. Everyone else can think whatever they want. Jake and I are okay now. He apologized for calling me weak. I apologized for not listening to him earlier. We're looking at houses, talking about our future. The inheritance is going to give us a good life, and I'm trying to feel grateful for that instead of guilty. My aunt hasn't reached out. That one still hurts. But maybe one day she'll understand why I made the choices I did. As for Dad, I visit his grave every Sunday. I talk to him, tell him about what's happening, ask him if I did the right thing. I don't get answers, obviously, but it helps. Last week I told him about settling with Marcus, and I swear I felt this sense of relief, like maybe he approved. Or maybe I'm just projecting what I want to believe. Here's what I've come to understand. There was no right answer here. No matter what I did, someone was going to be hurt, and someone was going to call me a villain. If I gave them everything, Jake would have been furious, and I'd have resented them forever. If I gave them nothing, my aunt and half the internet would have condemned me. The settlement with Marcus feels like the closest thing to a compromise I could manage, and I have to be okay with that. But I'd be lying if I said I don't have doubts. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder, what if Dad really was planning to change the will? What if Margaret misunderstood what he said? Or Linda's memory is faulty? What if I'm keeping money that was supposed to be shared? And then I think about Diane's Facebook posts, about Marcus showing up at my apartment, about the legal threats and the public humiliation, and I think, even if I am wrong, they didn't give me much choice. They came at me with lawyers and social media campaigns before we even tried to have an honest conversation. Maybe if they'd approached this differently, I would have been more generous. Or maybe I'm just making excuses. The truth is, I don't know if I'm the asshole in this story. I kept most of an inheritance that was legally mine, gave up a decent chunk of it to one sibling who was willing to be reasonable, and I'm still fighting off the other sibling who wants even more. Some people will say I'm generous for giving Marcus anything. Others will say I'm selfish for not splitting everything equally. Both perspectives have some validity. What I do know is this: my father made a choice when he wrote that will 7 years ago. He had 6 months to change it after reconnecting with Marcus and Diane, and he didn't. Whether that was intentional or just procrastination, I'll never know. But I have to believe he knew what he was doing. I have to believe that the father who raised me, who was there for every school play and every heartbreak and every milestone, wanted me to have security and stability after he was gone. And maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe I'm prioritizing the parent-child relationship I had over the one Marcus and Diane never got to have. Maybe I'm the villain in their story, the stepsister who got everything while they got scraps. I can live with being someone's villain if it means honoring what my father left for me. Or maybe I'm just trying to justify keeping money I should have shared. Maybe years from now I'll look back on this and regret not being more generous. I don't have the answer. All I know is I'm exhausted. The legal battle with Diane will probably drag on for months. My reputation in certain circles is permanently damaged. I've lost my aunt, at least for now. But I have Jake, I have my friends, I have a future that's financially secure, and I have my memories of my dad. Is that enough? It has to be. So here's my question to all of you. Am I the asshole for inheriting everything and only sharing a fraction with one of my half-siblings while fighting off the other in court? Was I wrong to prioritize my father's written will over what some people think was his unspoken intention? Should I have just split everything 3 ways from the start and avoided this entire nightmare? If you made it this far, thank you for reading. Please hit that like button and subscribe to Who's the Villain? ATA. Drop a comment telling me how you'd rate this situation on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you're completely in the right and 10 is you're absolutely the asshole. And tell me honestly, what would you have done in my position?